The power died at 11:43 p.m. Ethan Miller sat across from his boss in a room barely wider than a closet, watching Claire Thompson's carefully composed mask crack under the weight of cold air and darker silence. Outside, the blizzard hammered against thin walls. Inside one bed, one blanket. No signal, no escape. He had spent 3 years keeping his distance from this woman who could fire him with a signature, who had humiliated him that morning in front of the entire office. Now she was shivering. Now she needed him. And somewhere out there in the storm, his 7-year-old son was waiting for a father who might not make it home. It had started 12 hours earlier in a conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and corporate ambition. Ethan had been standing near the window, half listening to the quarterly report, when his phone buzzed. The school. Lucas had a fever. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and waited for the meeting to end, calculating how fast he could make it across town if he left by 3. Claire Thompson stood at the head of the table, her voice sharp enough to cut through the low hum of forced attention. She was walking through projected earnings with the kind of precision that made grown men check their notes twice. Ethan had worked under her for 3 years and had never seen her smile at anyone except clients. She wore gray like armor and spoke in sentences that left no room for negotiation. When the meeting ended, he moved toward the door. Her voice stopped him cold. "Miller, a word." He turned. The others filed out, not making eye contact. Claire waited until the door clicked shut, then folded her arms. She did not sit down. Neither did he. "You requested to leave early again today," she said. Her tone was flat factual. "That's the 3rd time this month." Ethan kept his expression neutral. "My son's school called. He's running a fever. I need to pick him up." "You have emergency contacts for situations like this. Neighbors, babysitters." "I'm his father," Ethan said quietly. "Not his babysitter." Claire's eyes narrowed just slightly. "I'm aware of your personal situation, Miller. But when you're in this office, your commitment is to this company, not to last-minute departures that disrupt workflow and set a poor example for the rest of the team." The words landed like stones. Ethan felt heat rising in his chest, but he swallowed it down. He had a mortgage. He had a kid who needed insurance. He had no margin for error. "Understood," he said. "Good." Claire turned back to her laptop. "We have a client meeting in Denver tomorrow. You and I are driving up together. The flight was canceled due to budget cuts, so we leave at 6 a.m. Don't be late." Ethan left the building 20 minutes later than he should have, his jaw tight, his hands cold. By the time he picked up Lucas from the nurse's office, the boy was asleep against the vinyl chair, cheeks flushed and damp. Ethan carried him to the car and drove home in silence, the radio off his mind, circling the same bitter loop. Commitment? As if he hadn't worked 60-hour weeks for 3 years straight. As if he hadn't missed bedtimes and school plays and parent nights because the company needed him. As if his son didn't matter. That night he made soup Lucas wouldn't eat and sat on the edge of the bed watching the boy sleep. The babysitter was coming early the next morning. Mrs. Callahan from 2 doors down, a retired teacher who smelled like lavender and asked too many questions. Lucas liked her. That was enough. Ethan packed his bag, set the alarm for 4:30, and lay awake until it went off. The streets were still dark when he pulled into the company parking lot. Claire was already there, standing beside a black SUV with her arms folded, breath steaming in the frozen air. She wore a long coat and leather gloves, her hair pulled back in a way that made her look even sharper than usual. Ethan loaded his bag into the trunk and climbed into the passenger seat without a word. Claire started the engine. The heater sputtered to life, rattling against the cold. She pulled out onto the highway, her hand steady on the wheel, her gaze fixed straight ahead. For the first 20 minutes, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either. It simply was. Then the snow started. At first it was nothing. Light flurries that melted against the windshield. But within half an hour, the flakes thickened, swirling in heavy gusts that made the road ahead disappear into white static. Claire leaned forward slightly, adjusting her grip. Ethan checked his phone. No signal. The radio crackled with weather warnings, voices cutting in and out through waves of static. A major system moving faster than expected. Blizzard conditions across the Rockies. Interstate closures imminent. "We should turn back," Ethan said. Claire didn't answer. Her eyes stayed locked on the road, tracking the faint outline of taillights ahead. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm, scraping ice with every pass. "Claire," he said again, "we need to turn around." "We're halfway there," she said. "We'll make it. Not if the highway shuts down. Then we'll find an alternate route." Ethan bit back a response. There was no point. This was who she was. Control, strategy, forward momentum. She would drive into a blizzard rather than admit she'd made the wrong call. 10 minutes later, the brake lights ahead flared red. The line of cars slowed, then stopped. Ethan looked out the window. The snow was falling so thick now he couldn't see past the guardrail. Claire shifted into park and turned on the hazard lights. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. They sat there for 40 minutes before a state trooper appeared, moving down the line of cars on foot, knocking on windows. When he reached the SUV, Claire rolled down her window. Cold air rushed in sharp and biting. "Highway's closed," the trooper said. His face was raw from wind. "Storm's worse than they thought. You'll need to find shelter. There's a motel about 8 miles north if you take the service road. After that, nothing until you hit the state line." Claire nodded. "Thank you." She rolled up the window, shifted into reverse, and maneuvered out of the line. The service road was narrow and unplowed, the snow already deep enough to scrape against the undercarriage. The SUV fishtailed, once then found traction. Ethan gripped the door handle and said nothing. If they went off the road here, no one would find them until morning. The motel appeared out of the white like a mirage. A squat, wood-sided building with a gravel lot and a neon sign that read, "Vacancy" in cold blue letters. Claire parked as close to the entrance as she could and turned off the engine. For a moment, they both sat there, listening to the wind hammer against the metal frame. "Let's go," she said. Inside, the lobby smelled like old carpet and wood smoke. A man in a flannel shirt stood behind the desk, his face lined and tired. He looked up when they entered, snow still clinging to their coats. "Need a room?" he asked. "2," Claire said. The man shook his head. "Only got one left. Storm caught everyone by surprise. Truckers, families, folks stuck on the road. It's all I got." Claire's expression didn't change, but Ethan saw the slight tightening around her mouth. She glanced at him, then back at the man. "Fine," she said. "We'll take it." The man handed her a key attached to a wooden tag with the number 7 carved into it. He gestured toward the hallway. "Down the hall, last door on the right. Power's been flickering all morning. Might go out completely if this keeps up. There's a wood stove in the room and some blankets in the closet. Stay warm." Claire took the key without thanking him. Ethan followed her down the narrow hallway, the floorboards creaking under their weight. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was small, a double bed with a faded quilt, a wood stove in the corner unlit, a single chair near the window, no television, no phone. The walls were thin enough that Ethan could hear voices from the room next door, muffled and distant. Claire set her bag on the chair and walked to the window, pulling the curtain aside. The world outside was nothing but white. "We'll stay here until the road's clear," she said. Her voice was calm, measured, as if this were just another meeting, another item on the agenda. Ethan dropped his bag by the door and looked at the bed. One bed. He thought about Lucas, about whether Mrs. Callahan remembered to give him the medicine, about whether the fever had broken. He thought about the conference room 12 hours ago and the way Claire had spoken to him in front of people who respected him. He thought about the fact that he was now standing in a room the size of a storage closet with a woman who had the power to end his career with a single email. "I'll take the floor," he said. Claire turned from the window. For the first time since he'd known her, he saw something flicker across her face. Not sympathy, not warmth, just the faint ghost of acknowledgement. "Don't be ridiculous," she said. "We're both adults. We'll manage." The lights flickered once, then went out. The room plunged into darkness, broken only by the pale gray light filtering through the window. Ethan heard Claire exhale a soft sound, swallowed by the sudden silence. Outside, the storm howled. Ethan found matches in the drawer beside the bed and kindling stacked near the wood stove. He knelt in the dark, striking match after match until the tinder caught. The flame grew, slowly casting long shadows across the walls. Claire stood near the window, her arms wrapped around herself, watching him work. When the fire finally took hold, he stood and brushed ash from his hands. "That should hold for a few hours," he said. Claire nodded, but didn't move from the window. The firelight caught the edge of her profile, softening the hard lines of her face. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, pulling out his phone. No signal. He checked it twice, as if the bars might appear through sheer force of will. Nothing. "Worried about your son?" Claire asked. Her voice was quieter than usual, stripped of the sharpness he'd grown used to. "Always," Ethan said. He didn't look up. "He had a fever yesterday. The sitter's with him, but she's not his mother. She's not me." Claire turned from the window. His mother passed 3 years ago. Cancer. The word came out flat, factual. Ethan had said it enough times that it had lost its weight. Or maybe he'd just learned to carry it differently. Lucas was 4. He doesn't remember much about her anymore. Sometimes he asks questions I don't know how to answer. Claire moved to the chair and sat down, her hands folded in her lap. The firelight played across her face, and for a moment she looked younger, less certain. "I'm sorry," she said. Ethan shrugged. "It is what it is. You do what you have to do." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackle of burning wood and the relentless wind outside. Claire leaned back in the chair, her gaze fixed on the fire. "I didn't mean what I said yesterday," she said finally. "About commitment." Ethan looked at her. "Yes, you did." "No." Claire's voice was steady, but there was something underneath it now. Something raw. "I meant it in the moment, but I was wrong." He didn't respond. He wasn't sure what to say. This was the woman who had dressed him down in front of his colleagues, who had questioned his dedication, who had never once acknowledged that he might have a life outside the walls of that office. And now she was apologizing. It didn't fit. "I don't have children," Claire said. She was still looking at the fire, not at him. "I don't have anyone waiting for me at home. My life is spreadsheets and conference calls and quarterly projections. That's all I know how to do. So when I see someone leave early, someone who has something worth leaving for, it feels like a threat. Like proof that I've built everything on the wrong foundation." Ethan studied her face. The firelight carved hollows beneath her cheekbones, shadows under her eyes. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from lack of sleep, but the kind that seeps into bone and stays. "You could have that," he said. "If you wanted it." Claire smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Could I? I'm 42 years old. I've spent the last 20 years clawing my way up a ladder that doesn't care whether I live or die. I've missed weddings and funerals and birthdays because I thought success would fill the gaps. It doesn't." Ethan shifted on the bed, leaning forward slightly. "Then why keep doing it?" "Because it's all I have left." The words hung in the air, stark and unadorned. Claire stood abruptly, crossing to the wood stove. She held her hands out toward the heat, her back to him. "I had a daughter once," she said. Her voice was low, almost swallowed by the storm outside. "Her name was Sophie. She was 6 years old when she died." Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him. He stayed very still, barely breathing. "It was a car accident," Claire continued. "A drunk driver ran a red light. My husband was driving. He survived. Sophie didn't. We buried her on a Tuesday in October, and by Friday, I was back at work because I didn't know what else to do. My husband left 6 months later. Said I was a ghost. Said I'd already buried myself along with her." She turned to face him, and Ethan saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before. Not anger, not control, just an endless aching emptiness. "So yes," she said. "I'm hard on people who leave early, because I can't stand the reminder that some people still have something worth going home to." Ethan stood slowly. He crossed the room and stopped a few feet from her, close enough to see the faint tremor in her hands. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't be." Claire's voice cracked just slightly. "It was a long time ago. That doesn't make it hurt less." She looked at him, then really looked at him, and something passed between them. Not pity, not absolution, just recognition. Two people who had lost too much and were still trying to figure out how to keep going. The fire crackled, the wind howled, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. The temperature dropped as the night deepened. Ethan fed the fire twice, but the cold crept in through the cracks in the walls, through the gaps around the window frame. He could see his breath in the dim light. Claire had wrapped herself in one of the blankets from the closet, sitting in the chair with her knees drawn up. She looked smaller than she had in the office, fragile. Around midnight, the fire began to die. Ethan reached for the last of the kindling and realized it was gone. He checked the closet, the corners of the room, under the bed. Nothing. The wood stove gave one final flicker, then went dark. The cold rushed in like water filling a hull. Within minutes, Ethan could feel it settling into his chest, his fingers, his feet. He pulled on his coat and gloves, but it wasn't enough. Across the room, Claire had gone silent. He looked over and saw her shivering, her arms wrapped tight around herself, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Claire," he said. She didn't answer. Her eyes were half closed, her breathing shallow. Ethan crossed the room and knelt in front of her, pulling off his glove to touch her hand. Her skin was ice. "Claire," he said again, sharper this time. "Look at me." Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused. He recognized the signs. Hypothermia, early stages, but it wouldn't stay that way for long. Not in this cold, not without heat. He made the decision in seconds. He pulled the blankets from the bed, spread them on the floor, near where the stove still radiated faint warmth, and guided Claire down onto them. She didn't resist. He lay down beside her and wrapped the remaining blankets around both of them, pulling her close against his chest. She was shaking so hard he could feel it through his coat. "I need you to stay awake," he said. "Do you hear me? Stay awake." "Cold," she whispered. Her voice was thin, barely audible. "I know. Just hold on." He held her tighter, sharing what little heat his body could generate. Her shivering gradually slowed her breathing, evening out. The storm beat against the walls, relentless and indifferent. Ethan stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of her against him, the rhythm of her breath against his neck. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Don't thank me yet. We're not out of this. I mean for everything, for not hating me." Ethan looked down at her. Her eyes were open now, clearer than before, tired but present. "I don't hate you," he said. "You should. Maybe." He shifted slightly, adjusting the blankets. "But I don't." She closed her eyes again, and this time she didn't pull away. They lay there together in the dark, the cold pressing in from all sides. And for the first time since they'd left the office, Ethan felt something other than anger. Something quieter. Something that scared him more than the storm. By dawn, the shivering had stopped. The storm had eased slightly, though snow still fell in thick curtains beyond the window. Ethan woke to find Claire still curled against him, her face inches from his, her breathing slow and steady. He didn't move. For a long moment, he just watched her sleep, this woman who had terrified him and infuriated him, and who now looked like anyone else who had been broken by life and was still trying to put the pieces back together. She stirred her eyes, opening slowly. When she realized how close they were, she didn't pull away immediately. She just looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Morning," Ethan said. "Morning." They stayed like that for a few seconds longer, the space between them charged with something neither of them could name. Then Claire shifted, sitting up and pulling the blanket around her shoulders. Ethan sat up as well, running a hand through his hair. "We should check if the power's back," he said. Claire nodded. She stood crossing to the light switch. She flipped it. Nothing. Ethan checked his phone again. This time a single bar flickered into existence for just a moment before vanishing. But it was enough. A notification appeared. A message from the school, time-stamped from the night before. Lucas had been taken to the hospital. High fever. Mrs. Callahan couldn't reach him. The words blurred. Ethan's chest tightened, his hands going cold for reasons that had nothing to do with the weather. He stood abruptly, grabbing his coat. "I have to go," he said. Claire looked at him, her brow furrowing. "Go where the roads are still closed." "I don't care. My son is in the hospital." "Ethan, you can't. Don't." His voice came out sharper than he intended. "Don't tell me what I can and can't do. You don't get to make that call." Claire's expression hardened. The softness from the night before vanished, replaced by the mask he knew too well. "This is exactly what I was talking about. You're letting emotion cloud your judgment. You'll get yourself killed out there, and then what good will you be to your son?" The words hit like a slap. Ethan stared at her, his pulse hammering in his ears. "Is that really what you think?" he said quietly. "That caring about my kid is a weakness. That's not what Yes, it is." He zipped his coat, his movements sharp and deliberate. "That's exactly what you think. Because you've spent so long burying everything that matters that you can't even recognize it anymore. I thought last night meant something. I thought maybe you were more than the Ice Queen everyone says you are. But I was wrong." Claire took a step back, her face pale. "Ethan, this is why you're alone," he said. The words came out cold and cutting, and he saw them land. Saw the way her eyes widened, the way her breath caught. "Not because you lost your daughter, not because your husband left, but because you choose to be. Every single day you choose control over connection, and that's on you." The silence that followed was suffocating. Claire stood frozen, her arms wrapped around herself, her face a careful blank. Ethan grabbed his bag and walked to the door. "Where are you going?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, stripped of its usual authority. "To find a way home," he said. "You can stay here and wait for someone to rescue you. That's what you're good at, White. Waiting for other people to fix things." He opened the door. The cold rushed in, biting and sharp. Claire didn't move, didn't speak. Ethan stepped out into the snow and pulled the door shut behind him. He made it 10 feet before he heard her voice, faint and breaking. "Ethan, wait." He stopped. Turned. Claire stood in the doorway, the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. Her hair tangled her face raw in a way he'd never seen. "Please," she said. "Don't go." "Why not?" His voice was flat. "Give me one good reason. Because I can't lose someone else." The words hung in the frozen air between them. Ethan saw the way her hands shook, the way she gripped the doorframe, as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. He saw the woman beneath the armor, and he hated how much it hurt to look at her. "I was wrong," Claire said. Her voice cracked. "About everything. You're not weak for loving your son. You're the strongest person I know. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Ethan stood in the snow, the wind cutting through his coat, his heart a mess of anger and something else he didn't want to name. He looked at her. This woman who had made his life hell for 3 years, who had just admitted more in 30 seconds than she probably had in a decade. "I have to get to him," he said. "I know." Claire stepped out into the snow barefoot, the blanket trailing behind her. "But not like this. Not alone. Let me help you. Please." He wanted to say no, wanted to walk away and never look back. But he saw the desperation in her eyes, the way she was reaching for him, not as a boss, but as a person who had been drowning for years and had finally found something solid to hold on to. He walked back to the door. Claire's shoulders sagged with relief, and she stepped aside to let him in. The door closed behind them, and the storm raged on. They sat on opposite sides of the room for the rest of the morning, Ethan by the window, watching the snow fall in relentless sheets. Claire in the chair, her knees drawn up, her face turned toward the dead stove. Neither spoke. The silence was thick with everything they'd said, and everything they hadn't. Around noon, Ethan's phone buzzed. He grabbed it so fast he nearly dropped it. 1 bar, flickering, unstable but there. He dialed Mrs. Callahan's number, his hand shaking. It rang twice before the call dropped. He tried again. Nothing. He tried the hospital. The line connected for 3 seconds, long enough for him to hear a receptionist's voice, then cut to static. He threw the phone onto the bed and pressed his palms against his eyes. His chest felt tight, his breathing shallow. Lucas was 7 years old. 7. And Ethan was stuck in a room the size of a closet with a woman who had just torn open every wound he'd spent 3 years trying to close. "Ethan." Claire's voice was soft, tentative. He didn't look at her. "Don't," he said. "I can try my phone. Sometimes different carriers." "I said don't." She went quiet. Ethan stood and paced to the window, then back to the bed, then to the door. The walls felt like they were closing in. He could hear his own heartbeat, loud and erratic. He thought about Lucas in a hospital bed, small and scared, asking for a father who wasn't there. He thought about the promise he'd made the day his wife died, that he would never leave their son alone, that he would always be there, and he'd broken it. "This is my fault," he said quietly. He wasn't talking to Claire. He was talking to the room, to the storm, to himself. "I should have turned the car around. I should have told you no. I should have put my son first." "You did put him first," Claire said. "You always have." "Then why isn't he here?" Ethan's voice broke. "Why am I stuck in this place with you instead of with him?" Claire stood slowly. She crossed the room and stopped a few feet away, her arms wrapped around herself. "Because sometimes life doesn't give us the choices we want," she said. "It just gives us the ones we can survive." Ethan looked at her. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked as lost as he felt. "I don't know how to survive this," he said. "Yes, you do." Claire took another step closer. "You've been surviving since the day you lost your wife. You've been doing it alone, carrying a weight no one should have to carry, and you haven't broken. Not once. That's not weakness, Ethan. That's strength." He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that staying here, waiting for the storm to pass, was the right choice. But all he could see was Lucas, small and fevered, reaching for a hand that wasn't there. "I need to get to him," Ethan said. His voice was raw, stripped of everything but desperation. "I need to know he's okay." "I know." Claire moved closer, close enough that he could see the faint lines around her eyes, the exhaustion etched into her face. "And we will. But not like this. Not by running into a blizzard that could kill you before you make it a mile." "So what then? We just sit here and wait." "We wait," Claire said. And we hope. And when the road's clear, I will drive you to that hospital myself. I promise." Ethan stared at her, searching her face for any hint of the woman who had humiliated him in the conference room, who had called his love for his son a lack of commitment. He didn't find her. The woman standing in front of him now was someone else, someone softer, someone who understood what it meant to lose everything and keep breathing anyway. "Why do you care?" he asked. Claire's expression shifted, something fragile flickering across her face. "Because you remind me of what I used to be, before I lost Sophie. Before I decided that caring about anything was too dangerous. And now I think maybe I was wrong." The words hung between them, tentative and uncertain. Ethan felt something crack open inside his chest, something he'd been holding closed for 3 years. He thought about his wife, about the way she used to tell him that love wasn't a weakness, that letting people in didn't make you vulnerable, it made you human. He sat down on the edge of the bed. Claire sat beside him, leaving a careful distance between them. They stayed like that for a long time, the storm howling outside, the cold pressing in, and neither of them speaking. It wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't unbearable either. "Tell me about him," Claire said finally. "About Lucas." Ethan glanced at her, then looked down at his hands. "He's stubborn. Gets that from me. He loves dinosaurs, and hates vegetables, and asks a million questions I don't know how to answer. Every night before bed he asks me to tell him a story about his mom. I run out of stories sometimes, so I make them up. He doesn't know the difference. Does he look like her? Yeah, same eyes, same smile." Ethan's voice softened. "Sometimes I look at him and it's like she's still here, and sometimes that makes it easier, and sometimes it makes it so much harder." Claire nodded slowly. She didn't offer platitudes or empty reassurances. She just listened, and somehow, that was enough. "What was Sophie like?" Ethan asked. Claire's breath hitched just slightly. "She was loud, always singing, always laughing. She had this way of filling up a room just by being in it. After she died, the house felt so quiet I couldn't stand it. I started working longer hours just so I wouldn't have to go home to the silence." "I get that," Ethan said. "After my wife died, I couldn't sleep in our bedroom for 6 months. I slept on the couch. Lucas would climb up next to me in the middle of the night, and we'd just lie there together. Eventually, that became normal." "Does it get easier?" Claire asked. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "No," Ethan said. "But you get stronger." They sat in the quiet, two people who had carried their grief alone for so long, they'd forgotten what it felt like to share the weight. Outside, the storm began to ease. The wind died down. The snow fell softer, lighter. By late afternoon, the power flickered back on. The overhead light buzzed to life, harsh and sudden. Ethan's phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out. Full signal. 3 missed calls. 2 voicemails. He played the first one. Mrs. Callahan's voice, shaky and apologetic. Lucas had spiked a fever of 103. She'd taken him to the emergency room. The second voicemail was from the hospital. Lucas was stable. Mild flu. They were keeping him overnight for observation, but he was asking for his dad. Ethan closed his eyes, relief flooding through him so fast it made him dizzy. He played the message again just to hear the words. Stable. Asking for his dad. "He's okay," Ethan said. His voice cracked. "He's okay." Claire's hand found as her fingers wrapping around his. She squeezed once, firm and steady. "I told you," she said. "You'd get through this." Ethan looked at her, and for the first time since they'd been trapped in this room, he smiled. It was small, tentative, but it was real. "We should go," he said. Claire nodded. "Let me grab my things." They packed, quickly checking out with the man at the desk, who informed them the main highway had just reopened. The drive back was quiet, but not in the way it had been before. The silence was softer, less fraught. When they reached the hospital, Claire parked near the entrance and turned off the engine. "Do you want me to come in?" she asked. Ethan shook his head. "I think I need to do this part alone." Claire nodded. "I understand." She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card, writing something on the back before handing it to him. "That's my personal number. Not my work line. If you or Lucas need anything, call me." Ethan took the card, his fingers brushing hers. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet." Claire looked out the windshield, her expression unreadable. "When we get back to the office, I'm going to put in a request to transfer you to a different department. You're too good at what you do to stay under me. You deserve a boss who sees that." "Claire, it's not a punishment," she said quickly. "It's the right thing to do. For both of us." Ethan studied her face, the careful control slipping back into place. But underneath it, he saw something else, something that looked like hope. "What if I don't want a different boss?" he asked. Claire's eyes widened slightly. "Ethan, what if I want to see where this goes? Not as your employee, as someone who thinks maybe we both deserve a second chance." She stared at him, her lips parted, her breath shallow. For a long moment she didn't speak. Then slowly she smiled. It was tentative and uncertain, but it was real. "Then I guess we'll figure it out," she said. Ethan got out of the car and walked into the hospital. Lucas was in a room on the 3rd floor, propped up against pillows, his cheeks flushed, but his eyes bright. When he saw Ethan, he grinned. "Dad." Ethan crossed the room and pulled his son into his arms, holding him tight enough to feel the steady rise and fall of his breathing. "I'm here," Ethan whispered. "I'm here." 3 weeks later, Ethan started in a new department. Claire stopped by his desk on his first day carrying 2 cups of coffee. She set one down in front of him and leaned against the edge of his desk. "How's Lucas?" she asked. "Good. Back to asking a million questions." "Good," Claire smiled. "He sounds like a smart kid." "He is." Ethan looked up at her. "He wants to meet you, actually. Keeps asking about the lady who helped his dad in the snowstorm." Claire's smile softened. "I'd like that." "Dinner?" Ethan asked. "This Friday." "It's a date." She walked away, and Ethan watched her go, something warm settling in his chest. Outside the window, snow began to fall again, soft and quiet. But this time, it didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a beginning.